juvenile detention centers. Recently, I've been going through a little bit of like a research mood. Like I find random topics to research and I'm really interested in them. I should be focusing on my homework, but uh, my friend texts me about 2 months ago, sends me a video, and one of my classmates that I grew up with has a court case. And I'm thinking, that's not right. He's 16 years old. Why is he showing up to court? I don't know what's going on. And so I do a little bit more digging, and he's stolen iPhones and then attacked someone with scissors. And I'm going, this isn't the kid that I grew up with. And I do a little bit more research with talking to some of my old friends. And it turns out that 4 people that I grew up with in Australia are now currently in juvenile detention centers, which is crazy. That just blows my mind, because these are kids that I knew when I was 6 years old, and I hung out with them every week, and it's a weird sensation. And I start to think, why do 16-year-olds that maybe came from not so good homes, why are they doing all these crazy things and getting themselves in trouble? I mean, why am I so fortunate, and why are they out there doing, they're stuck there for 6 months because they're making these bad choices? And these aren't bad people. They're like nice people. It's just they're making these really bad choices, and the system's it's really messed up. So I'm going to get into that a little bit and talk about some statistics. In the United States, 50,000 children or young adults a day are in juvenile detention centers. 50,000, which is a massive number. It's crazy. And 60% of them are in juvenile detention centers for non-violent crimes, which is even weirder to me. It boggles my mind. That's 60%. And these are things like truancy, drug use, minor property damage, but these are all non-violent things. And you have 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 17-year-olds that their brains are still developing. They're going through this chaos in their heads. And they're making these mistakes, and they have to be, the government and the law system is just putting them away for months, like it's something they can just get rid of. And this didn't sit right with me. So being myself, I Googled it a bit more, found some facts, and what I came across was really, really concerning. I mean, juvenile detention centers are a failure. They fail to rehabilitate the youth, and they perpetuate a cycle of crime that can last a lifetime. People who are part of juvenile detention centers and staying there are much more likely to be going in jail and facing time as an adult. They're much more likely to get addicted to drugs. They're much more likely to join gangs. They're much more likely to surround themselves with violence and crime because of a mistake they made when they were 15, 16 years old. And let's face it, we've all made mistakes when we're 15 and 16 years old. And yeah, going back to the problems, I started looking at employment rates, and I realized people that made mistakes when they were younger and they served time in juvenile detention centers, they don't get employed nearly as much as people who stayed in school. Because let's face it, if you're in a workforce and you have a list of people that you want to work for you, and you're picking them, who are you going to pick? The guy who stayed in school, or the guy who was in juvie for half a year because of some dumb thing that he was put up to by his friends? It's a problem that our law system, instead of focusing on rehabilitating these children, we kind of push them away. We put them in places like juvenile detention centers. We put them in harsh environments, and they end up not really learning. There are alternatives, of course. There's coming together as a community and working it out. There's actually been a few different ways that people are trying to fix the problem with juvenile detention centers. We have one thing called rehabilitative justice. It's a mouthful. And so what you do is you bring the victim, the perpetrator, and the community together, and you work on an answer that it doesn't bring them to such a terrible place. You talk to them, and you work out in the community what they did wrong and how you can help it. There's mental health facilities and there's workforces that are like taking in specific people that have made crimes so they don't mess up their entire lives. Because one mistake as a teenager can set your life completely wrong for 10, 20, 30 years. I'm not going to stand here and justify such extreme things like homicide, but I read a case that a man was put up to gang violence because he was born in a really bad part with his family, and he killed a person. And I'm not justifying that, But the fact that he did 30 years, got out when he was 45, and couldn't find a job until he was 60, can you imagine that? As a 15-year-old, because of the place that you grow up in, the place that you're born in, you're then put up to this dumb gang initiation, and you get 30 years, and you've thrown away your life for what? And it's in those scenarios that you can't really say no because, one, you don't really know how to. It's not really socially acceptable. And two, we're all teenagers, so we're going to want to fit in. So going back to my friend, him and I started talking more and more about, these people that we grew up in and how they're in juvie. And they were for really dumb things. I read a case that someone got in juvie because of multiple offenses, but they were really dumb ones, like loitering. Did you know loitering is an offense that can work towards your juvie case? It's stupid, right? Just standing there maybe when you're not supposed to be there. Trespassing as well. It's these laws that kind of take kids who don't really understand what's going on, they're doing risky things, and you take them and you put them away and you put them in a harsh environment surrounded by people who have actually done terrible things. It's flawed. And we really need to start working as a community because even though we have all these therapeutic places and we have people that are only hiring at-risk teens, it's not doing a difference. Because going back to the original statistic, we have 50,000 people in the United States alone. Can you think worldwide what would that be? Like, how many tens of hundreds of thousands of people are now serving juvenile detention sentences for doing a childish mistake? It stresses me out thinking about it because it's really upsetting because as a guy who, I'm here now. I'm here, so I'm not really hanging out with those people anymore as they're, across an ocean. But it's people that I used to, cook with after school, in school programs. It's people that I used to play sports with. And to think that 4 of them, kids in my class, are now locked up in some terrible place with people who've done awful things like murder and rape. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, one of them I used to trade Pokemon cards with. Like, the guy I traded Pokemon cards with and played Beyblades with is now, serving time in some awful correctional facility that probably won't solve his problems. Because a lot of people who come out of these, their problems aren't solved. They get trauma. Because they don't really know. You're put into a place where your brain is still developing and you're surrounded by, all these awful people, and you get trauma that can last 10, 20, 30 years. It's really concerning. So I want to encourage everyone, I guess, because I understand that maybe not everyone here, no one really has the power to change the law, but I want everyone to kind of look at people who are going into juvenile detention facilities in a better light, maybe. Because while we're teenagers, we all make dumb decisions, and it's easy to look at someone and go, oh, they were in juvenile detention facilities for a year. They must have done something bad. The law is never wrong, and I'm sure when they come out, everything's going to be better. It's easy to say, okay, they were in there for a while, so they must have done something awful. But a lot of these kids, like I said, 60% of them, non-violent crimes. It's just, I want you to look at these people differently. I want you to think of them like they are actual people, like they are actual kids. Because the problem is when you bring someone into a juvenile detention prison, you're kind of categorizing them as, one, an adult. I get the kind of like feeling that you're not really treating them like a kid anymore. The innocence has sort of been taken away. And that just upsets me deeply because why? They've been put up to something dumb and then all of a sudden they're an adult, they're a hardened criminal. They did time for a year, they can't get a job, they're addicted to drugs, they're surrounded by gangs. Like, my time's almost up, so I'm just going to leave it with you to look at people differently. Because obviously the system is flawed, and I don't expect it to change soon, because that's how messy things are. But I think it would be better if people and your community started maybe focusing on the perpetrator and the victim and trying to bring them together before doing something so extreme, before pushing them away into a harsh, cold place that really has no benefits at all, that can really change someone's life and burden them for many years. I'm Jed Bishop, and thank you for having me.